最后的一位，这一位是一位很早就成名的建筑师，他在 TED 上面的演讲是 Building Uniqueness， 就是盖一个非常特别的这个房子。那这个特别不是稀奇古怪，也不是搞怪，它有它的一个逻辑跟道理，我非常喜欢，所以等我们就待会儿来分享他的影片。我们先看看为什么我们需要听他的话。他的建筑物 from Grand Library 就是从这个很大的图书馆到 intimate apartment， 就是一个非常具有这个亲密感的一个公寓都创造出来一种品质，这种品质就是光和自然的一个混合。那么我想这个他在1967年的蒙特楼的这个就像上海这一次的世博，他是那一次是1967年是蒙特楼的世博，那么他推出了一个新的建筑物的概念，就是这个，在蒙特楼的世博，他盖了这样子的一个房子。那么在那个时候，1967年的时候是相当的这个轰动，每一个建筑物都对到一个这个好的景色。然后每一个它基本上是一个预铸房屋的一个概念，然后让房子不再是一个像堆得很整齐的一个那时候大家流行的一个讲法。我在当学生的时候流行一个讲法，就是说一个一个高楼都很像一个一个的墓碑，那他至少把它变成像一个垃圾场，玩笑话。这个是他前一阵子的一个作品，他做的一个图书馆，加拿大的一个图书馆，里头的空间非常的像教堂。这个是他最近完成的在新加坡的一个建筑物，那么上面连起来，下面有3栋房子。你可以看到他每一个房子，他都想要说一点什么。那这个说一点什么是很重要的。他等一下我们从他的影片中间来看看他到底想说什么。
So what I'd like to talk about is something really that was very dear to Khan's heart, which is how do we discover what is really particular about a project? How do you discover the uniqueness of a project, as unique as a person? Because it seems to me that finding this uniqueness has to do with dealing with the whole force of globalization, that the particular is central to finding the uniqueness of place and the uniqueness of a program in a building. And so I'll take you to Wichita, Kansas, where I was asked some years ago to do a science museum on a site right downtown by the river. And I thought the secret of the site is to make the building of the river, part of the river. Unfortunately, though, the site was separated from the river by McLean's Boulevard. So I suggested, let's reroute McLean's. And that gave birth instantly to Friends of McLean's Boulevard. And it took 6 months to reroute it.
这个是一个基地，他希望这个基地这一条路不要经过这里，因为他让这个建筑物能够盖的地方跟水是分开了，所以他希望它是这样子过来的。那么他刚刚花的时间跟大家解释的就是这件事情。
The first image I showed the building committee was this observatory, astronomical observatory, the Jantar Mantar in Jaipur, because I talked about what makes a building of science. And it seemed to me that this structure, complex, rich, and yet totally rational, it's an instrument, had something to do with science. And somehow building for science should be different and unique and speak of that. And so my first sketch after I left was to say, let's cut the channel and make an island and make an island building. And I got all excited and came back, and they sort of looked at me in dismay and said, an island? This used to be an island, Ackerman Island. And we filled in the channel during the Depression to create jobs. And so the process began, and they said you can't put it all on an island. Some of it has to be on the mainland because we don't want to turn our back to the community. And there emerged a design, the galleries sort of forming an island, and you could walk through them or on the roof. And there were all kinds of exciting features. You could come in through the landside buildings, walk through the galleries into playgrounds in the landscape. If you were cheap, you could walk on top of the bridge to the roof, peek in the exhibits, and then get totally seduced, come back and pay the $5 admission. And the client was happy, was sort of happy because we were $4 million over the budget, but essentially happy, but I was still troubled. And I was troubled because I felt this was capricious. It was complex, but there was something capricious about its complexity. It was what I would say compositional complexity. And I felt that if I had to fulfill what I talked about, a building for science, there had to be some kind of a generating idea, some kind of a generating geometry. And this gave birth to the idea of having toroidal generating geometry with its center, one with its center deep in the earth for the landside building, and a toroid with its center in the sky for the island building. A toroid, for those who don't know, is the surface of a donut, or for some of us, a bagel. And out of this idea started spitting off many, many kind of variations of different plans and possibilities. And then the plan itself evolved in relationship to the exhibits. And you see here the intersection of the plan with the toroidal geometry. And finally, the building, this is the model. And when there were complaints about budget, I said, well, it's worth doing the island because you get twice for your money. Reflections. And here's the building as it opened with a channel overlooking downtown. And as seen from downtown, and the bike routes going right through the building, so those traveling the river would see the exhibits and be drawn to the building. The toroidal geometry made for a very efficient building. Every beam in this building is the same radius, all laminated wood. Every wall, every concrete wall is resisting the stresses and supporting the building. Every piece of the building works. These are the galleries with the light coming in through the skylights. And at night, and on opening day. Going back to 1976. In 1976, I was asked to design a children's memorial museum in the Holocaust Museum in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, which you see here, the campus. And I was asked to do a building, and I was given all the artifacts of clothing and drawings, and I felt very troubled. I worked on it for months, and I couldn't deal with it because I felt people were coming out of the historic museum. They are totally saturated with information, and to see yet another museum with information, it would make them just unable to digest. And so I made a counter proposal. I said no building. There was a cave on the site. We tunnel into the hill, descend through the rock into an underground chamber. There's an anteroom with photographs of children who perished, and then you come into a large space. There is a single candle flickering in the center. By an arrangement of reflective glasses, it reflects into infinity in all direction.
除了刚刚的那个博物馆以外，这个博物馆是为儿童设计的。各位如果对于欧洲的历史不是那么清楚，这个就是在纳粹大屠杀的时候，被这个牺牲掉的小孩。那以色列为了要让他们这些这个牺牲的小孩做一些纪念，所以就是有这个博物馆。那么它的一个概念就是说，不要再去盖一个房子，因为对面就是一个纪念性的博物馆，大家从那里出来已经知道太多这件事情的资料了。我们现在需要的是一个让他们能够沉淀而感动的地方，所以他建议，从一个山洞走下去，然后走到这样的一个空间。我之所以非常喜欢这样的一个空间，是因为他进来的时候看到许许多多小孩的照片，那些照片呢都 让我们接近那些小孩，但是摸不到那些小孩。但是当走到这个最主要的空间的时候，它只有用一根蜡烛以及周围的镜子，那些镜子跟镜子互相之间的反射，很像蜡烛传的一根蜡烛，蜡烛传的一根蜡烛那样子的一个宗教感觉，其实已经把那个纪念性的意义，比你给他再多的资料都来得重要，因为他永远不会忘记这个博物馆、纪念馆。
You walk through the space. A voice reads the names, ages, and place of birth of the children. This voice does not repeat for 6 months. And then you descend to light and to the north and to life. Well, they said people won't understand. They think it's a discotheque. You can't do that. And they shelved the project. And it sat there for 10 years. And then one day, Abe Spiegel from Los Angeles, who had lost his 2-year-old son at Auschwitz, came, saw the model, wrote the check, and it got built 10 years later.
刚刚的那个 project， 你可以感觉到，回到我们的课程的重点，在一个模糊的阶段，他感受到那个房子应该不是一个房子，那个就是重点。他说那个不应该盖个房子，虽然你们叫我来盖个房子。当他聚焦的时候，他说这个东西应该是一个山洞，应该这样解决，应该用一支蜡烛，然后有所有的镜子。然后评图的人说：“你想要盖一个迪斯科，你想要盖一个舞厅啊？”所以就把它否决了。那个设计就冰在那里没做，因为也没有钱。直到10年以后，他刚刚说的，把自己的小孩在那个2岁的时候被纳粹这个牺牲掉的那个小孩的父亲看到这样的一个设计的时候，他写了一张支票，让这个房子能够再盖起来。这个过程就是我说的，当你模糊到聚焦的时候。有人并没有跟着你聚焦，他可能连模糊的阶段都还没有，他心里想要盖个房子，他的目标很清楚，我要盖个房子。可是你说不要盖个房子，你的模糊阶段跟他的聚焦阶段是反过来的，所以他说我不要盖，那不要盖就停在那里，直到有一个人他的模糊阶段跟你的聚焦阶段是完全吻合，他感受到那个你的聚焦就是他的模糊的答案。那他就给你一个机会盖起来，所以，各位同学以后在做各种的设计的时候，你一定会碰到许许多多这样子的一个情况，你一点都不必要觉得难过，也不必要觉得这个失望。为什么？因为那个并不是，如果你真正感受那个是对的时候，那个就不是你的错了，那个就是表示负责做决定的人，他念头里的聚焦。跟你的模糊不同，或者是他念头你的模糊跟你的聚焦完全不同，这些需要等到时间对的时候，它才会出现。
So many years after that, in 1998, I was on one of my monthly trips to Jerusalem, and I got a call from the foreign ministry saying, "We've got the chief minister of the Punjab here." He is on a state visit. We took him on our visit to Yad Vashem. We took him to the Children's Memorial. He was extremely moved. He's demanding to meet the architect. Could you come down and meet him in Tel Aviv? And I went down. And Chief Minister Badel said to me, we Sikhs have suffered a great deal, as you have Jews. I was very moved by what I saw today. We are going to build our national museum to tell the story of our people. We're about to embark on that. I'd like you to come and design it. And so, it's one of those things that you don't take too seriously. But 2 weeks later, I was in this little town, Anandpur Sahib, outside Chandigarh, the capital of the Punjab, and the temple, and also next to it, the fortress that the last guru of the Sikhs, Guru Govind, died in as he wrote the Khalsa, which is their holy scripture. And I got to work. And they took me somewhere down there, 9 kilometers away from the town and the temple, and said, that's where we have chosen location. And I said, this just doesn't make any sense. The pilgrims come here by the hundreds of thousands. They're not going to get in trucks and buses and go down there. Let's get back to the town and walk to the site. And I recommended they do it right there on that hill and this hill and bridge all the way into the town. And as things are a little easier in India, the site was purchased within a week, and we were working. And my proposal was to split the museum into two. The permanent exhibits at one end, the auditoria and library and changing exhibitions on the other, to flood the valley into a series of water gardens and to link it all to the fort and to the downtown. And the structures rise from the sand cliffs. They're built in concrete and sandstones. The roofs are stainless steel. They are facing south and reflecting light towards the temple itself. Pedestrians crisscross from one side to the other. And as you come from the north, it is all masonry growing out of the sand cliffs as you come from the Himalayas and evoking the tradition of the fortress. And then I went away for 4 months, and there was going to be a groundbreaking. And I came back, and lo and behold, a little model I'd left behind had been built 10 times bigger for public display on the site, and the bridge was built. We didn't do working drawings. And 500,000 people gathered for the celebrations. You can see them on the site itself as the foundations are beginning. I was renamed Safdie Singh, and there it is under construction. There are 1,800 workers at work, and it will be finished in 2 years. Back to Yad Vashem, 3 years ago, after all this episode began, Yad Vashem decided to rebuild completely the historic museum because now Washington was built, the Holocaust Museum in Washington. And that museum is so much more comprehensive in terms of information. And Yad Vashem needs to deal with 3 million visitors a year at this point. They said, let's rebuild the museum. But of course, the Sikhs might give you a job on a platter. The Jews make it hard. International competition, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And again, I felt kind of uncomfortable with the notion that a building the size of the Washington building, 50,000 square feet, will sit on that fragile hill, and that we will go into galleries, rooms with doors and sort of familiar rooms to tell the story of the Holocaust. And I proposed that we cut through the mountain. That was my first sketch. Just cut the whole museum through the mountain. Enter from one side of the mountain, come out on the other side of the mountain. And then bring light through the mountain into the chambers. And here you see the model, a reception building and some underground parking. You cross a bridge, you enter this triangular room, 60 feet high, which cuts right into the hill and extends right through as you go towards the north. And all of it then, all the galleries are underground, and you see the openings for the light. And at night, just one line of light cuts through the mountain, which is a skylight on top of that triangle. And all the galleries, as you move through them and so on, are below grade. And there are chambers carved in the rock, concrete walls, stone, the natural rock when possible, with the light shafts. This is actually a Spanish quarry, which sort of inspired the kind of spaces that these galleries could be. And then coming towards the north, it opens up, it bursts out of the mountain into, again, a view of light and of the city and of the Jerusalem hills. I'd like to conclude with a project I've been working on for 2 months. It's the headquarters for the Institute of Peace in Washington, the U.S. Institute of Peace. The site chosen is across from the Lincoln Memorial. You see it there, directly on the mall. It's the last building on the mall, on axis of the Roosevelt Bridge that comes in from Virginia. That too was a competition, and it is something I'm just beginning to work on. But one recognized the kind of uniqueness of the site. If there were to be anywhere in Washington, there would be an office building, a conference center, a place for negotiating peace, and so on, all of which the building is. But by virtue of the choice of putting it on the mall and by the Lincoln Memorial, this becomes the structure that is the symbol of peace on the mall. and that was a lot of heat to deal with. The first sketch recognizes that the building is many spaces, spaces where research goes on, conference centers, a public building because it will be a museum devoted to peacemaking. And these are the drawings that we submitted for the competition, the plan showing the spaces which radiate outwards from the entry. You see the structure as in the sequence of structures on the mall, very transparent and inviting and looking in. And then as you enter it again, looking in all directions towards the city. And what I felt about that building is that it really was a building that had to do with a lightness of being, to quote Kundera, that it had to do with whiteness, it has to do with a certain dynamic quality, and it had to do with optimism. And this is where it is. It's sort of evolving. Studies for the structure of the roof, which demand maybe new materials, how to make it white, how to make it translucent, how to make it glowing, how to make it not capricious. And here, studying in 3 dimensions, how to give some kind, again, of a order, a structure, not something you feel you could just change because you stopped the design of that particular process. And so it goes. I'd like to conclude by saying something. I'd like to conclude by relating all of what I've said to the term beauty. And I know it is not a fashionable term these days, and certainly not fashionable in the discourse of architectural schools. But it seems to me that all this, in one way or the other, is a search for beauty. Beauty in the most profound sense of fit. I have a quote that I like by a morphologist, 1917. Theodore Cook, who said, "Beauty connotes humanity. We call a natural object beautiful because we see that its form expresses fitness, the perfect fulfillment of function." Well, I would have said the perfect fulfillment of purpose. Nevertheless, beauty as the kind of fit, something that tells us that all the forces that have to do with our natural environment have been fulfilled, and our human environment for that. 20 years ago, in a conference Richard and I were together, I wrote a poem which seems to me to still hold for me today. "He who seeks truth shall find beauty. He who seeks beauty shall find vanity. He who seeks order shall find gratification. He who seeks gratification shall be disappointed. He who considers himself the servant of his fellow beings shall find the joy of self-expression. He who seeks self-expression shall fall into the pit of arrogance. Arrogance is incompatible with nature. Through nature, the nature of the universe and the nature of man, we shall seek truth. If we seek truth, we shall find beauty." Thank you very much.
最后的这一段他自己写的话，非常值得我们思考。那么，尤其是各位在非常年轻的时候，把这些似懂非懂的东西做一点点思考，对我们的这个脑的结构也是有好处的。我再放一遍，让各位再听一次。
He who seeks truth shall find beauty. He who seeks beauty shall find vanity. He who seeks order shall find gratification. He who seeks gratification shall be disappointed. He who considers himself the servant of his fellow beings shall find the joy of self-expression. He who seeks self-expression shall fall into the pit of arrogance. Arrogance is incompatible with nature. Through nature, the nature of the universe and the nature of man, we shall seek truth. If we seek truth, we shall find beauty. Thank you very much.
所以，无论他在做博物馆，还是这样子的一个商业建筑，我想，我们大概都可以从中间发现一些他的特质。这些特质就是他希望 在他刚刚说的，他希望找到美感，这个美感是透过一个真理的追寻而来的。那我们把这句话回到我们最近几个星期在说的，就是说，我们如何在追求美感的中间，模模糊糊的感觉到一些东西，然后把这些模糊的阶段变成一个孕育种子的一个开头，然后让它能够生根，然后能够发芽。在能够生根跟发芽之前，我们需要把这个我们模模糊糊的这个东西变成一个破。那当它在生根跟发芽的同时，它也出土了。当它出土以后，它就变成是一个聚焦的阶段。那这些聚焦的阶段就是叶子，就是花，就是果。我们今天在讲的就是叶子、花、果，以及怎么从果又变成种子，然后让它再多一个循环。那透过这个Bill Gates 的这个太太，我们了解到如何运用非常商业的 Coca-Cola 的方法，能够真正的去让非盈利的机构，包括政府，能够真正的学习为什么他们那么成功。它并不是没有共通的道路。